You have heard of Pakistan's front lines, but have you seen the shadows behind the flag?
In every shadow they stood watch. These are the stories of the ones who never walked away.
The sky was dark, not with clouds, but with smoke and fear. The fields of Punjab, once full of crops and farmers, were now filled with noise, gunshots, screams, and the roaring of fighter jets. War had come again. The enemy had crossed the border without warning. They were firing on villages, army posts, and anything in their path. The soldiers of Pakistan were ready. They stood strong, even though they were few in number. Their hearts were brave, their hands firm on their rifles. They knew they were fighting not just for land, but for their people, their homes, and their faith. Among them was Captain Harris, a young officer from Lahore. He had just turned 29. His eyes were sharp, his uniform neat, and his heart full of love for Pakistan. His mother always prayed for him at the famous shrine of Data Darbar, asking the saints to protect her son. She would say, "My son, the saints never leave us. They protect this land. You'll never be alone." Harris would smile, though he didn't always understand what she meant. But on this day, as he stood on the battlefield, surrounded by smoke and fire, her words echoed in his mind. The battle had started before the sun rose. The sky was still dark when the first bullets flew. By midday, 3 of Harris's soldiers had been martyred. They fought bravely, but the enemy had more tanks, more men, and more weapons. Harris's unit was cornered. Their ammunition was almost finished. The sound of the enemy tanks coming closer filled the air. Captain Harris looked at his men. Some were wounded. Some were scared. But no one wanted to give up. Harris whispered the kalima under his breath. La ilaha illallah. He closed his eyes for a moment and prayed. He prayed for help. He prayed for strength. He prayed for a miracle. And then, something changed. The warm wind suddenly turned cold. The sun was still high, but a strange chill moved across the field. A deep silence fell, as if the world had stopped breathing. Harris felt something, like a soft hand resting on his shoulder. It felt warm, calm, and full of peace. He turned around. No one was there. But he felt it. Something was different. Suddenly, the enemy tanks stopped. Their engines were running, but they did not move forward. The enemy soldiers looked confused. Some began shouting. Others started firing in fear at the empty air. One dropped his weapon and ran. From behind a broken wall, Harris and his men saw it. Figures were moving through the smoke and dust. They were not soldiers. They were not ordinary men. They wore white robes, and their faces shone with a light that was not from this world. They moved quietly, like the wind, with no fear. Wherever they walked, the earth beneath them seemed to tremble gently, like it was alive. A wounded soldier beside Harris whispered, "Captain. They are here. The saints. Baba Farid. Lal Shahbaz Calendar. They've come." Captain Harris could hardly believe his eyes, but his heart knew the truth. These were the great Sufi saints of the land. Men of peace, love, and faith who had walked these lands centuries ago. Now, in the hour of need, they had returned. The enemy troops were terrified. Some screamed that they were seeing visions. Others fell to their knees and cried. Their radios stopped working. Their tanks didn't move. Their hearts were filled with fear. And then they began to run. The mighty army that had crossed the border with confidence was now retreating in panic. They left their weapons behind. They left their tanks. All they wanted was to escape whatever power had risen against them. Captain Harris looked around. His men were still alive. Some were crying. One of them, Naim, touched his chest and said, "Sir. I was hit. I was sure I would die. But I felt someone touch my wound. And the pain went away." Harris knelt on the ground. He looked up at the sky, tears in his eyes. He was a soldier. He believed in strength, in strategy. But today, he saw something beyond all that. He saw faith come alive. He saw prayers answered. That night, under a sky full of stars, Harris wrote a letter to his mother. "Amma, you were right. The saints never left us. Today, when we were surrounded by death, I felt the presence of someone who walked with light. I saw the invisible guardians of our land. We are safe, not just because of our weapons, but because we are never truly alone. Your prayers. They reached the heavens. And the heavens replied. The next day, the battlefield was quiet. The enemy had gone. The land was safe. But something had changed in the hearts of the soldiers. They were no longer afraid. They knew now that the spirit of Pakistan was not just in its people, but also in the love, faith, and sacrifice that built it. As soldiers returned to their homes, they told stories of what they had seen. Some spoke of glowing figures. Others said they heard soft chanting, like the zikr heard in shrines. Some said they saw green lights in the sky, just for a moment. But all of them agreed, they had been saved by a power beyond this world. In small villages, old men and women said they felt the earth shake gently that day, even though they were far from the border. Some swore they saw the shrines of saints glowing at night. Flowers appeared on graves without anyone placing them there. Lamps stayed lit without oil. Something holy had touched the land. Back in Lahore, Harris visited the shrine of Data Darbar. He removed his boots, washed his hands, and walked quietly to the tomb. He closed his eyes and placed his hand on the marble. "Thank you," he whispered. Around him, hundreds of others were praying, some for jobs, some for health, and many, like his mother, prayed for sons and daughters in uniform. They lit candles and tied threads of hope to the gates. They believed. Captain Harris now believed too. He was no longer just a soldier. He had become a witness to a miracle. He began to share his story, not loudly, but with those who needed hope. He visited schools, orphanages, and hospitals, telling young people that courage comes in many forms. Sometimes, it comes with a uniform. Sometimes, it comes with a prayer. Years passed, but the story of that day did not fade. It became legend. People called it the day the saints returned. Poets wrote about it. Singers sang of the invisible guardians. Artists painted images of glowing figures walking through dust and fire. And mothers continued to pray at shrines, their faith stronger than ever. In army training centers, young cadets were told the story of Captain Harris and his men. Not just to make them brave, but to remind them that their mission was more than war. It was about protecting the spirit of Pakistan. The country faced many more challenges, floods, terror, poverty, but it never gave up. Because deep in the heart of every Pakistani was the belief that even in the darkest times, help would come. Maybe in the form of a soldier. Maybe in the form of a saint. Or maybe in the form of a mother's prayer. Pakistan is safe. Not just because of weapons, but because faith still walks her fields, love still guards her borders, and the invisible guardians still stand watch. Now, there is a question for you: who do you think is the real hero of this story, Captain Harris, the saints, or the mother? Tell in the comments. And don't forget to like, share, and subscribe.